All right, today we're going to explore the life of one of history's most effective and powerful leaders, a man who, in just 10 short years, took a regional power and forged it into a global empire. We're talking about Omar ibn al-Khattab, Raziallahu anhu, a phrase that means, may God be pleased with him. These are his own words, and they perfectly capture the incredible scale of his journey. I mean, think about that for a second. He went from being a simple camel herder in Makkah, answering to his father, to becoming the leader of a massive empire, answering only to God. That kind of transformation is almost unheard of in history. You know, today nearly 2 billion people follow Islam, and the groundwork, the actual administrative and legal foundations that were laid during the 10-year rule of Omar ibn al-Khattab, Raziallahu anhu, were absolutely essential for managing that early growth and creating a stable state that could last. The change under his leadership was just staggering. In a single decade, the Islamic State went from being a local Arabian power to a true empire, one that dwarfed even what Alexander the Great had built, spanning parts of Asia, Africa, and Europe. He didn't just conquer lands, he built a system. So the real question is, how on earth did he do it? To really understand the Caliph, we first have to understand the man. And before Islam, he was already a major figure in Mecca, a man known for his incredible strength, his sharp mind, and his influence. What's really interesting is that his background gave him this unique mix of skills. From his father's clan, the Banu Adi, he got the art of diplomacy and negotiation. But from his mother's clan, the famous Banu Maksum, the same clan as warriors like Khalid ibn Walid, Rabiallahu anhu, he got that fierce, decisive spirit. That blend of diplomacy and strength would really define his rule later on. His conversion story is one of the most pivotal moments in early Islam. He was one of its greatest opponents, but his heart was completely turned by the words of the Quran, and his acceptance of Islam was a huge turning point. It gave the early Muslims the courage to finally pray openly at the Kaaba for the very first time. Okay, so now he's the second caliph, and he inherits a state that's at war with the two superpowers of the day, the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. Instead of picking one or trying to make peace, he decides to take them both on at the same time. And just look at this timeline. The pace is breathtaking. In less than 10 years, his armies did what took other legendary empires centuries. They totally dismantled the Persian Empire, the world's number 2 superpower, and pushed the Roman Empire, which had dominated for 1,000 years, right out of Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. But then, right in the middle of all this incredible success, he makes a decision that is still debated today. He removes his top general, the legendary Khalid ibn al-Walid, Raziallahu anhu, a man known as the Sword of Allah, who had literally never lost a battle. Why would he do that? This is so important to understand. It wasn't a personal issue. Omar Raziallahu anhu saw a potential danger to the faith of the army. People were starting to think that victory came from the genius of Khalid Raziallahu anhu instead of from God. So he made this incredibly tough call to protect the core belief of his people and to make it clear that all generals answered to the central government in Medina. But here's the thing. The victories on the battlefield are only half the story. You could argue that his true genius was in building the state itself. He created the entire administrative machine needed to run a huge, diverse empire, and made sure it was both stable and just. He was a true innovator. He set up independent courts, a public treasury to manage the state's money, a police force, and even the Islamic calendar that's still used today. He would appoint governors to different provinces, but then he'd also appoint intelligence officers, secretly, to report back to him directly. It was a brilliant system of checks and balances. And perhaps no single event captures his leadership style better than the conquest of Jerusalem. After a long siege, the city's Christian patriarch offered to surrender peacefully, but he had one condition. He would only hand over the keys to the city to the caliph himself. So what did Umar ibn al-Khattab Raziallahu anhu do? He traveled all the way from Medina to Jerusalem. He didn't arrive like a conquering emperor, but as a humble leader. He personally signed this treaty, which we now know as the Pact of Umar, guaranteeing safety for the people, their homes, and their churches. It set a historic standard for religious freedom. Because of his deep commitment to justice, he earned the title Al-Faruq, which means the one who can distinguish between right and wrong. And this wasn't just some nickname. It was the principle that guided his entire rule, from his laws to his military decisions to guaranteeing the rights of non-Muslims in the empire.
His rule completely changed the world, but it wasn't meant to last forever. So let's finish by looking at how his life came to an end and why his legacy has been so incredibly influential for more than 1,400 years.
His life was cut short when he was assassinated by a Persian slave while he was leading the morning prayer in the Prophet's mosque. But even in his final moments, his priority was the stability of the state. Instead of naming his own son as his successor, he created a council of 6 of the most respected companions to choose the next leader, making sure the transition would be smooth. And when you look at his lasting legacy, this chart really says it all. Yes, the military expansion was huge, but it wasn't the biggest part of what he left behind. The administrative systems and the judicial reforms he established, that was the foundation. That's what allowed the empire not just to survive, but to truly flourish for centuries to come.
And that brings us to the final big question. The legacy of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu seems to suggest that building something that lasts isn't just about winning battles. It's about building systems of justice, accountability, and strong moral leadership. It's about making sure that the foundations of the state are even stronger than its armies.